Hi everyone, it's Master Ben and welcome back to another Star Citizen video. Now today I want to cover a topic that has been on my mind for quite a while now. So for context, I've been following Star Citizen from the original Kickstarter, but I only actually purchased the game back in 2021. Before then I just didn't have a PC good enough, so I'd watch from afar. Back then I never really would have thought to ask this question, however in the past year especially, this question has become more and more prevalent in my mind. So join me today as we define what is pay to win within Star Citizen, and I'll show you a couple of examples within my mind which stand out to be quite possibly or very pay to win. But once I've made my case, I'd really like to hear your point of view. It's really important to note that this is my view on pay to win, so if yours is different, I would like to hear that. I would say do it in a constructive way. Everyone is different, especially in Star Citizen. There are people who have spent $45 on the game and never put a penny more in. And there are people who spent $45,000 on the game. This is going to be a very much person by person topic. But let's kick things off today by defining what is pay to win in my mind. Now this is coming from someone who played World of Tanks for 10 years, which is inarguably a hugely pay to win game. So some of this will transfer over and some of it is totally new to me. So personally I would define paid to win as gaining an advantage through financial means on top of the additional cost of a game. So to me this does not include grind skipping to an extent, which I'll come back to later, as theoretically given enough time everyone could get to the same position. In my mind it basically boils down to this: if you can get it for free, it's not pay to win. If it's only accessible through more money and gives you an advantage other players cannot get, then it's pay to win. There is a few small times where I think that's slightly incorrect, which I'll come back to later on. So in Star Citizen, before we even discuss what is pay to win or what could be pay to win, we actually have to understand what is our time frame. Because if we're talking about when the game is released, well then this could be another 10 years until the game is technically pay to win or not pay to win. Given the game has taken this long to make so far, I actually think it's a very valid topic following the whole development of the game, not just the final release. In reality, people who are pledging for ships today are still using them in the verse today. They're not pledging just for the final release, so actually pay to win is already in the game. We can't just ignore imbalance until the final quote unquote release comes out. So this brings me on very nicely to my first example, and that is the Anvil F8C Lightning. Released back in 2023 as part of a 10-year celebration of Star Citizen, the F8C was only available to those who found a golden or platinum ticket during this timed event. As I'm sure you're all aware, the gold ticket was so common, there was nothing really skill based about the event. In the end it just turned into a find the ticket and then pay your money for the ship. The reason the event was set up this way was to bypass CIG's typical rule of releasing ships into the persistent universe to buy for AUEC one major patch after its initial release. So basically, when the F8C was good in 320, 321 and 322, the only way to use the best fighter in the game was to pay $250 war bond before tax or $300 of store credit. Now I am sure that no one made this financial leap just to get the meta ship, and any of the sales for that reason were totally coincidental. It just so happened that everyone really wanted this heavy fighter, which happened to be the best in the game. So in this example, we have the best ship for sale at a huge price with no CCU path allowed, and it just so happened to be the best ship for 6 months in the game. And while the ship isn't good right now, what happens when it's good again? Should everyone just accept this fate? For me personally, this is a perfect example of pay to win. Sure, CIG could nerf the ship at any point, and you could argue that 323 has been a natural nerf to a ship. However, it's still arguably the best heavy fighter in the game, even though heavy fighters aren't really a problem right now, so I don't really want to get too much into the weeds there. The main point is, until Squadron 42 comes out, where you're meant to be able to get the ship through grinding out achievements, but we don't really know how that works because that promise was made 10 years ago, any time where this ship is good in a patch, it is a benefit that only people can get through spending huge amounts of money on a game. But let's move on to the second example. And in 323, the F8C isn't good anymore, so maybe it was just a one-off and we're never going to see this kind of imbalance again. Can anyone else hear an F7C Mark II fly over the hill? Oh, yeah, there's one right there. Okay, so before we get into this one, let me make something clear. Yes, the F7A's current handling is apparently a known issue which should be mended by the time this video comes out, or hopefully. But, to be a little bit of a cynic for a moment, if you are actively running an event to sell another very expensive medium fighter, surely you would balance it or release a micro patch as soon as possible to mend a crazy strong fighter that can give some players a huge unfair advantage in PvP. But this is a much smaller issue because in reality, if a micro patch comes in, when it comes in, the ship won't be, or hopefully won't be, much more overpowered than its in-game variants. The bigger issue for me, just like the F8C, is the fact that it wasn't directly sold and therefore will likely not be for sale for AUEC in the game, at least for the short to medium term. So once again, we have a fighter that when it's strong in patches will be entirely pay to win because it cannot be purchased in-game by any means. So we've looked at the ships, now let's look at the consumables and weapons. In a recent shotgun tier list, myself and Drax spoke about the Dead Rig shotgun, only available in the CitizenCon 2943 bundle for around $45. And if I'm not mistaken, it should be coming to the game in 4.0. But until then, it is by far the most horribly broken shotgun in the game. Now, many of you pointed out in the comments of that video that shotguns aren't really in a useful position right now, but that's because you're not using the correct one. This thing is a two-shotting monster and is most definitely a viable choice in most scenarios. Thankfully, because this is an open world game, when you die, you lose your loot unless you can get it back. This style of pay to win is far smaller in the game, but it's still there, so it's something to consider. And the last area I want to talk about here, I would say is a grey area, and it's what I alluded to earlier on the time to catch up to your credit card. How long should someone have to spend to catch up to what you can buy? I'm going to pick an extreme example here because this is where I feel like the case is the most valid. Let's take the Idris. A ship this size should only be purchased by orgs or large sums of people pooling their money together. It is expected to take vast sums of money not only to purchase the ship, but also to keep it running day in, day out. Whereas anyone with a wallet can skip this initial fixed cost. Of course, the running costs are still here, but hey, you just saved hundreds of millions of AUEC compared to other people. I could even go use the Idris to loot the people running goods to buy one. This also extends to the grey area of insurance on prepaid ships. I don't want to talk about insurance too much, because so little is known it's anyone's guess on how this could end up. But there is still a chance that ships purchased today with lifetime insurance are far cheaper to reclaim than people in the game who have had to pay for their insurance separately. If we take the wider picture here of an Org v Org battle, an Org with full lifetime insurance ships or prepaid insurance will feel far more comfortable making risky maneuvers compared to an Org of free-to-play players who have only paid for the base version of the game. So here I've given you 4 quite strong contenders of where I believe that Star Citizen is leaning into the pay-to-win section. But do I think the game is actually fully pay-to-win? Well, let me start by saying that I think 3.23 is one of the least pay-to-win patches out there, especially when the F7A has been corrected to the properly handling figures. Now, anyone who's gone to watch some high-tier PvP tier lists will see that the F7A is not actually listed as the #1 PvP ship, and that is because those sorts of players, interceptors, are far more powerful due to their much stronger maneuverability figures. However, for the average player, giving you decent maneuverability with vast amounts of guns, especially 2 size 4 guns, is a huge advantage for the average player. I want to make that really clear. The F8C especially highlights a product that was flat out better than any other ship in its class and will only be available to unlock through the pledge store until the release of Squadron 42, where you're meant to be able to unlock it through completing the game. But then again, we don't know what this will look like. That promise was made 10 years ago, and since then we were told that the F8C would never be sold, and then it got sold. So I don't know if I trust those words until I see them happen. While some of you may disagree that I think time can be paid to win in its extreme cases, imagine you own an Aurora on day 1 of the patch. Your life cycle will look totally different to players such as myself who have spent mine on the game. I already have ships that can do any ERT in the game and like trading. This will save me countless hours, especially as we see ship prices go up and up, which I think they should do because right now the game is too cheap in some areas. In the short term of a full wipe, players who spend money will win almost every engagement compared to players who don't spend money, because they have access to vast amounts of resources which a standard player will not have. But this does not stop free-to-play players from catching up and beating those players in the longer term. So just before we wrap up, I want to make it really clear, before I see a single comment saying this, that I do not like people who spend money on the game. I have spent quite a sum of money on this game. Lots of people have. The average account value in Star Citizen as of June of 2024 is $134 per player. So the average person owns at least a Cutlass Black on their account these days. There is nothing wrong with spending money on this game. However, it's important to note that every time you buy something, it could, not necessarily, but could change the balance of the game for the long term. So to wrap this up, folks, I would say that yes, the game has some pay to win elements. The F8C and the F7A Mark II is patch dependent, but until they are sold to the wider public in-game, ships like these create gaps within the game balance that cannot be easily bridged. Items such as the Dead Rig are pay to win within their own ecosystem. Thankfully, the benefit of Star Citizen is size. I'm sure some of you are aware I've only spoken about a tiny part of this massive game today. Trading, box missions, mining, salvage, racing, I could go on. All of these areas have not really been touched by pay to win, at least in my eyes. Now, of course, there's always the argument that some ships aren't available to everyone for short amounts of time when they first get released. However, this is part of the funding model of the game, and therefore I don't think we can get too into the weeds here. So finally, I'd like to say this. As the game continues to grow in the long term, these elements should fall into line, assuming they are managed ethically and not with the intent to tempt people into FOMO of meta. Cloud Empyrean Games could quite easily have made the F8C the best ship in the game intentionally for 6 months. They then could quite easily make the F7A the best ship in the game for another 6 months before releasing a new better ship in the game at Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. We have to put our faith in them that they will not do this and they will continue to maintain the balance of the game. And for now, I truly believe they could do this as long as they have a long-term approach to their game, and I really believe they do. So with that, folks, if you've made it to the end of the video, I really hope you have your own opinions on this topic, and I would genuinely love to hear them in the comments below or in my Discord, which I'll have linked below as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.